Welcome to Crime Beat. I'm Anthony Robart. Tonight, it was a disturbing case of grisly finds, leaving investigators with no starting point. Who was the victim and who was the killer?
Friday night, a woman's left leg is found in a waste transfer station in the city's East End.
Police converged on this quiet Parkdale neighborhood early in the morning after a passerby made a discovery. Not an entire human body, just human remains.
The very first thing that's going through my mind is, how am I ever going to be able to find out who this person is?
You know somebody you know is missing. You hear what's going on in the news. The last thing on earth you want is those two things to be related.
The public wanted to know who she was, we wanted to know who she was, and we were doing everything we possibly could.
What are the two things that people think of after they kill? Number one, I hope I don't get caught. Number two, I didn't know bodies were so heavy.
It's not just murder. This is beyond murder.
Here now is the tragic slaying of a Good Samaritan.
On the 11th of November 2005, I was on call with the homicide squad. I was the lead investigator, and I received a phone call from our headquarters duty desk indicating that human severed legs had been found at the Bermondsey transfer station in the east end of the city.
Friday night, a woman's left leg is found in a waste transfer station in the city's East End.
I was there with my partner. I had a forensic pathologist with me, numerous uniform officers from the local division, and lying on the floor of this massive garbage transfer station, which is a location where garbage from all over the city of Toronto is brought to before it's packaged into large trucks and sent to the United States, I could see two human legs that had been severed right at the top of the body. They were examined by the doctor, who indicated to me that these legs were severed with a hand saw. I was a seasoned investigator. I had been in the homicide squad for over 8 years, but I had never, ever been assigned a dismemberment case, so it was shocking to see. So I'm looking at these legs, and one of them has got like a delicate-looking ankle bracelet on, surmising that the deceased is a female person, but definitively I don't even know. What I do know is that I have no idea who she is or where she's from. I don't know really anything at all. And as a result of that, I knew that on day one, that was going to be my biggest challenge.
That's a strain on an investigation when you don't even know who your victim is. Typically, we can match up a missing persons case to a dismembered body. You find out quicker who the victim is in those types of cases.
We had an opportunity to speak to a private citizen who was allowed into the transfer station to dump some shingles from his home onto the floor. Just at the same time, the truck containing the severed legs was dumping its load. The truck contains approximately 5 apartment buildings worth of garbage. As the garbage is dumped out onto the floor, obviously it separates itself. As the truck moved forward to scatter the load onto the floor, the legs fell out of the truck on the driver's side, right in front of this private citizen. They were contained within a garbage bag, but as a result of the truck compacting its garbage for delivery to this particular location, the bag had split. If, in fact, that the legs had been contained in the center of the load of the garbage truck as the garbage was being dumped onto the floor, those legs would never, ever have been found. There's a whole number of emotions to go through. You know, who was this person? Could this be a domestic assault? Could it be a sex trade worker? This is the worst starting point for any investigator because of the fact that the body's not intact and the identity of the victim is like completely unknown.
From an investigative perspective, identifying the victim is a key factor because, that really opens up the surrounding areas of your victimology. Who was the victim? Who did they know? Where did they go? What did they do in life? Everything about them comes from identifying them. Typically when you have an investigation, you're starting with those who are close to the victim, and then you expand outward. You start with family members, you start with friends, you start with associates, co-workers, people that may have come in contact with the victim, and you just keep going further out and further out until you are able to identify a person of interest or a suspect. So without having the identity of the victim and no other evidence at the time, you're not able to advance the investigation very far.
We ended up taking garbage, discarded items that were found around the legs and photographing that. Not to show the legs, but to show items found around the legs so that people from the community could say, those were items that I discarded into the garbage, and as a result of that, it's very likely that the legs came from the South Parkdale area. At approximately 11 o'clock, I spoke to the media and updated them with regards to that human remains had been found within the garbage site. I never said what they were. I never said that they were legs. Unbeknownst to me at the time, the killer was watching the news and he reacted to it.
Coming up on Crime Beat, the killer's next move provides another clue. But is it enough for investigators to identify their Jane Doe? Welcome back to Crime Beat. Police have spent the night working hard to identify their victim when the killer drops another clue. We now return to the tragic slaying of a Good Samaritan.
Police converged on this quiet Parkdale neighborhood early in the morning after a passerby made a grisly discovery in the laneway. Not an entire human body, just human remains.
On Saturday, the 12th of November 2005, I was called to this particular location, which is Milky Way Lane in the Elm Grove and Queen area, and I had reports from uniform officers that a female human torso had been found in this particular laneway. The torso of the deceased was found where I'm pointing, so it was up against this particular fence. It was lying on its back. It was in November, so the torso was frozen. It was cold outside, and the torso had been covered by an ambulance blanket for privacy because of the area residents. The body had been found by an area resident when he came out in the morning to drop some garbage off. I had the forensic pathology unit here making a comparison to what they found, and it was apparent that it was connection to the discovery that we had made the night before. Both areas of human remains belong to the same person. She is female white. She's 150 to 170 pounds approximately. She's 5'6" to 5'9" approximately. She has light brown hair. She was of an approximate age, somewhere between 35 and 45 years of age. She was wearing a tensor bandage on one leg. She had a butterfly ankle chain on the other.
Toxicology results show that the woman didn't have any drugs in her system that would be typical of a street worker. The only drugs were of a prescription variety, codeine and Valium.
In addition, she'd had a child, at least one child. She had a visible hysterectomy scar on her abdomen, and all of that information, in addition to height, weight, things that were found on the legs, were all released to the media repeatedly in an effort to try to identify her. The Center of Forensic Science was asked to participate in an examination of the torso, and during that examination, in the hair and fiber section, they were able to tell us that there were red carpet fibers that were found on the torso of the deceased person. The information about the carpet fibers was never released to the public. It was holdback evidence. I impeach anyone out there with information to look at this bracelet and reach into their memory with regards to somebody they know that might be wearing such an item. Partway through the investigation, I had an opportunity to speak to Dr. Peter Collins. What I was looking for from him was, would he be able to give me a psychological profile of an offender that might be capable of dismembering and discarding a human body, into the garbage.
What are the two things that people think of after they kill? Number one, I hope I don't get caught. Number two, I didn't know bodies were so heavy, or that I'd be left with a body. Plan A is the murder, there's no plan B. And they're now faced with dismemberment. The most common reason for dismemberment, and that's why it's called defensive dismemberment, is so they can get rid of the body. Dismemberments take place mostly at home, either in a bathtub, or they will go out after the homicide to get a tarp, containers or bags to place the body parts in. And usually it's tools that are already within the house or within the kitchen. But I've had cases where they will go to the local store, which is helpful obviously for detectives, and they will buy items that will assist in cleaning up as well.
Police say there are no indications that this was the crime scene. So they say by the time this is all done, there will be at least 3 locations they're investigating. Here, the transfer station, and wherever it is that the victim was killed.
You know anybody that was wearing this bracelet?
We constructed a very large investigative canvas team that were going to be instructed to go from door to door within the focused area, which is in the South Parkdale area, knock on people's doors and ask them to sign a waiver for the police to come in and search their home or residences or garages or sheds.
Here. I would encourage people to check their properties for things that don't belong to them.
Just asked if all my employees were accounted for, my clients, if any were missing, if I noticed anything out of the unusual.
Information posters blanket Queen Street near the alley where a woman's torso was found over 2 weeks ago. But police still have no idea who she is, though they now believe she may have been the victim of a domestic assault.
Somebody in a relationship has said, you know, my wife or my girlfriend has left me, and they indicated that she's never coming back, and people are accepting that as a valid explanation.
The task was going to be monumental. We felt it could take over 6 months every single day with 45 officers canvassing within the community, working their way up and down streets within the search area.
They took a look around our apartment. They asked us if we had any power tools or anything around, which was quite disturbing. They were looking for garbage bags, and then they asked us if we knew anybody that matched the victim's description.
Absolutely nothing marks the spot where a woman's torso was found earlier this month. Typically by now there'd be a memorial of some sort, but at this point she remains nameless.
When I was campaigning in the election of 2006, it was a January election, so we were campaigning in the coldest months. It was dark much of the time. I remember one evening we were going door to door in South Parkdale and hearing that someone had discovered body parts, that a woman had been murdered. As we were knocking on doors in these cold, dark evenings, police were also knocking on the doors of residents in the neighborhood trying to find a killer. And it was frightening, quite frankly.
With the holiday season fast approaching, police are pleading for help.
Dig down deep and try and identify this woman for us. We don't want the holiday season to go by with this woman being missed and not being with her loved ones. And I make that appeal to you from the bottom of my heart.
We don't know who the victim is for weeks that we're trying to identify through various media outlets, through community engagements, door knocks, back and forth, having multiple officers go around the Parkdale area that we know the garbage trucks came from to try and identify who's missing. You know, scouring missing person reports, checking with social services, anyone not cashing their checks, doctor's offices, anybody missing appointments. We're trying everything to try and identify this person so we could give her a name.
We would go door to door and ask people to sign a waiver of consent. That way we're allowed to go into their homes and take a look around room to room. The reason we were there, as part of the investigation, there was carpet fibers found on the torso, red carpet fibers, and then we're told to look for that when we're looking in these homes or apartment units, and also any tools that might have been used for cutting up the body, also more than likely the crime happened, or cutting up the body would happen within the unit or the home, and also the tub or bathroom would be used for that, and therefore we were told to look for any new bath mats, new shower curtains, because there would have been a lot of blood.
On December the 6th of 2005, we received a phone call from a woman by the name of Janet Lum. She was the superintendent of 245 Dunn Avenue. Janet Lum had a conversation with Robert Wisnowski. He lived in apartment 503. He lived with a woman by the name of Rose McGroarty, and during that conversation, Mr. Wisnowski said to Miss Lum, the superintendent, that Rose had left him and she was not coming back. She didn't believe Mr. Wisnowski because of the fact that the couple owned a dog that they'd had for a number of years, and Miss Lum said that Rose McGroarty would never leave that dog behind without taking her with her. That particular tip was assigned right away, and 2 officers from the investigative task force went to Mr. Wisnowski's apartment.
Coming up, based on that phone tip, police knock on the door of apartment 503 and are shocked by what they learn from the missing woman's common-law partner. Following a new lead, police meet Robert Wisnowski for the first time. And finally, pieces of this gruesome puzzle come together. We return now to the tragic slaying of a Good Samaritan.
Fortunately for us, 3 weeks into the investigation, we did receive an investigative tip from the superintendent of 245 Dunn Avenue that brought apartment 503 to the forefront of the investigation. 245 Dunn was within the search area, but it had not been reached yet. If it hadn't have been for Ms. Janet Lum's information, the superintendent at 245, we never would have been at Mr. Wisnowski's apartment, and we may not have been there for weeks.
We knocked on the door, he opened it slightly. We identified ourselves as we were in plainclothes, so we showed our badges, and within a second he opened the door wide open and says, "Come on in, officers." And we stepped in. I kind of found that strange, the way he greeted us. I started looking around the apartment, and I started to see what we were told to look for, which was a red carpet, because there's red carpet fibers found on the torso. Saw a toolbox in the bedroom. We were told to look for excessive cleaning products. And also I noticed a mop and bucket in the corner of the living room. John started asking Robert questions about when's the last time he saw Rose. He said she went out to London to visit her mother sometime in late October. So now we're there December the 6th, so he asked him when's the last time he saw her. He says, I haven't seen her since that time. So then he asked, where did she go? He said she went out to see her mother, who was ill. And so then John's asked for Rose's mother's phone number. John continued to ask questions, I asked some questions. And when questions were asked about her appearance, who else she knows or where else she might be, he spoke of her in past tense. That caused the hairs on my arms to stand. That time in my mind, I'm like, he did it.
And I can remember the call. The officers are in the hallway, and they're calling us to alert us to Mr. Wisnowski's answers, and they're whispering, like, you gotta get down here right away. Like, I think this could be the guy.
In the early 2000s, Parkdale was a fairly notorious community. The folks living in this area, and I would say considered by the rest of Toronto, this was kind of rough. There were people here who lived on very limited incomes, people who were of no fixed address, wandering the neighborhood, sleeping on park benches and the like.
It's very difficult to generalize, who this person might be just because we're in Parkdale and there are, drug users and prostitutes, but that are in the area. But these kinds of stories seem to happen everywhere.
The fact that a woman was murdered, and the fact that a woman was dismembered, and the fact that her body was being found in Parkdale was it was like a dagger to the heart.
Sometimes people write other people off that are on social assistance, but what I learned about Rose was that she wasn't about to be written off. She was somebody who wanted to make a difference, so she got involved in a wonderful Parkdale organization called the Parkdale Activity and Recreation Center.
So Park is based on the premise of 4 important parts of the work, which is a home, a job, a friend, and a neighborhood. Rosie, of course, really fit into the friend piece.
Rosie was so great. She would come in every day and she would come to my office. She would come to see me and give me a smile and give me a hug, and we'd talk about what was going on for the day, and then she'd go and make her way to work in the kitchen.
We were preparing about 200, 250 meals a day, and that often was to help people out who didn't have access to, they could pay their rent, but they couldn't afford a meal. So we would provide a meal every day, and Rosie was a part of making that happen.
She always took care of the task at hand. She was friendly about it. She was very caring. I can visualize her moving around the kitchen and her bright smile and her little hat on. Never short of a hug or a smile for anybody.
So it was November, and we'd heard that she'd gone to visit her mother in London, and then she hadn't returned, is what we had heard. And then there were these parts of human body showing up in garbage bags in the neighborhood. And that really triggered people. It could have been anybody, any one of the women that were helping in the kitchen. And it really struck a chord. There are so many different events that would be going on.
Before Rosie had let us know that she was taking a couple of weeks vacation from volunteering, and she'd done that before. She'd taken a few days here or there, and she was going to visit her mother. What was different was she didn't come back when she said she would. Rosie was somebody you could count on like clockwork. So if she said, I'm going to be back on the 10th, she'd be back on the 10th. And she wasn't. The only person missing at that time at Park was Rosie when the body parts were being discovered. But we kept thinking it wasn't her because she had a destination and she had gone to her mother's before. That wasn't out of the usual.
I know that some of the kitchen folks who were connected to Rosie had reached out to her partner and just asked where she is. And there was a lot of, I guess, not clear indication of why she's not coming back to work. And of course, some people then thought, well, maybe she's still with her mom. So, there was a bit of confusion.
So at the time when we heard that a woman's body parts were found not too far from where she lived and in the neighborhood, Cook and I saw each other and said, nah, it couldn't be. No. It was unfathomable. We didn't know what to do. We didn't want to trust that it could be Rosie. Somebody is missing. You hear what's going on in the news, and as a human being with a heart and doing this kind of work, the last thing on earth you want is those two things to be related to one another. The very last thing.
After the break, suspecting they've found their man, police bring Parkdale resident Robert Wisnowski in for questioning. Will he confess? Or can he explain why his common law partner, Rose McGroarty, hasn't been seen in weeks? Welcome back to Crime Beat. Thanks to a phone tip and some sketchy answers he's provided, police are pretty sure Robert Wisnowski has killed and dismembered his common law partner of 17 years. So they brought him in for questioning. But will he confess to the crime? We now return to the tragic slaying of a Good Samaritan.
The 6th of December 2005, we invite Robert Wisnowski to 14 Division. He's not under arrest. He comes with us voluntarily.
I want to make it clear, you're not in custody and you're not under arrest for anything. Okay?
We conduct a videotaped interview with him with regards to the circumstances surrounding the fact that he has a female partner who's missing.
You must have some idea what happened to her. You must be horribly worried.
I am, sir, yes.
Yeah. I'm just concerned.
I'm confused myself.
Yeah? Confused about what?
Because I haven't heard nothing from her.
Mm-hmm. No phone call, no letter?
No, nothing. I just don't know what to make of it myself.
We have a conversation with him with regards to his relationship with Miss McGroarty.
I laid a finger on her in my life.
Right. Okay. Okay.
We had a very good, solid relationship. You could even ask her mother.
We ask him about her physical description, which he provides to us.
Any scars, being surgical or otherwise?
Yeah, she had a hysterectomy, around a 4-inch scar on her belly.
We found out what medications that she had in her body. They were all the same medications that Rose McGroarty had. Her height was the same, her weight was the same, her hysterectomy scar was exactly the same as what the deceased had.
Because I'll tell you, Robert, what I'm doing and the answers I'm trying to get from you is that body that's or the portion of it that's over there in that laneway has every single characteristic of Rose. Okay, and now my partner asked you, and you know you're under oath, right? And you also know you're not under arrest for anything, right?
Right.
Okay. Did you do anything to Rose?
No, sir. Definitely not.
So during the interview, my partner and I took a break. We went out into the hallway to have a discussion of the information we had learned so far. And we both agreed that Mr. Wisnowski was clearly a suspect.
I'm going to caution you right now, Robert, okay? I'm going to tell you that you're a suspect. You have the right to speak to a lawyer. I just want to be clear. Do you understand that?
Yes.
Would you like to call one now?
No.
We continued to confront Mr. Wisnowski during the interview that it would appear to us that the human remains do belong to his longtime common law partner, and we indicated to him that he owes it to Rose to give us an explanation as to what happened.
Give her back her name. You owe it to her. You have to do it, Robert. Give her back her name, Robert.
Something happened that is not part of your nature, okay? Tell us what happened and give Rose her name back, okay? She's a headless woman lying in a cold laneway, okay, that they called me to, you know, and it was upsetting for everybody. Tell us who she is and return her name to her so her family have some peace and so that they know what happened to her.
At one point, Mr. Wisnowski becomes quite emotional. He starts to cry.
You absolutely owe it to her. You owe it to her mom. What happened?
I don't know what happened.
How did it happen? How did it happen, Robert? How did it happen,
I really don't know.
Well, start from the beginning, okay?
It must have taken some time.
I don't know what happened, man.
Oh, how did it?
Out.
And how did it happen? Robert, you owe it to her. You absolutely owe it to her. You know that, right? Look at me. You know that, right?
Last December I was doing some crack.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Last December?
Yeah, and I got some help at the Clark.
Mm-hmm.
And she was gonna leave me, and I promised I'd never do it again. I was smoking it in the bathroom, and she caught me.
Mm-hmm.
Then it mixed up with my medication. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I just kind of hit her, and I don't know what happened. She just fell down, and that was it.
Mm-hmm. What'd you hit her with? What did you hit her with?
I don't know, my wrench for the truck.
Your what?
Apart from my truck there.
Okay. Like a wrench?
It's in my house.
Okay. And then what happened?
I don't know, I just stood there looking at her, didn't know what to do.
Mm-hmm. Did she pass away?
Yeah.
And then what happened, Robert? How many times did you hit her?
I just hit her once. I don't know, it must have been pretty hard. I didn't even know what the hell I was doing.
Okay. Do you know where on her body you hit her? Okay. You tell us in your own words, Robert. We're not going to interrupt you. What happened then?
I just freaked out. I filled the bathtub up and I left it there like for a week or something.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know what to do. My medication took over on me, you know.
Mm-hmm.
That month I got 100 Valium and I ate them all. You know, I was so goddamn nervous. I didn't know what to do.
Robert, listen to me. Okay, before you go any further. Okay.
I just take your gun out and shoot me in the head.
No. Robert, listen to me. Okay. Bear with me, okay, Robert, for a second, okay?
You listen up, okay?
Robert, right now, okay, you're under arrest for murder.
He indicated that he put her in the bathtub to try to contain, the smell from within the apartment so that other residents wouldn't call the police. And he indicated to us that over the next several days, it took him to dismember Rose's body and start to dispose of her. And during that process, just to get through the dismemberment of her, he indicated he was smoking a tremendous amount of crack cocaine just to try, to get through this horribly unpleasant task that he had decided to, undertake. And as a result of it, he was high as he was doing this. He would fill the tub with water, and then he would flush the tub again, and then he would fill the tub with water, and the tub would go red. And he continued to use the washroom. And the remains of his 17-year common law partner in the bathtub in various stages of dismemberment. His description of it was like beyond belief, and I think it was beyond his own belief about the task that he had undertaken and how gruesome it was.
This is finally over, that in our minds the deceased has a name and she has an identity.
After 3.5 weeks of investigations, Toronto police finally know the identity of the woman whose gruesome remains were found at Bermondsey transfer station in a Parkdale alleyway. And they've charged her 50-year-old common-law spouse with second-degree murder.
After, he's under arrest and he's had an opportunity to speak to his lawyer and he's gotten some advice from him, our conversation is now surrounding him telling us where the remaining body parts of Miss McGroarty are.
For the third time in less than a month, forensic investigators find body parts belonging to a woman who until recently police could not identify. But this time detectives say they were told where to look, sent here by the woman's common-law husband, now charged with her second-degree murder. The accused, 50-year-old Robert Wisnowski, was arrested late Tuesday at the couple's Parkdale apartment and is seen here leaving the prisoner cells at 14 Division Wednesday morning on his way to court.
Mr. Wisnowski indicated that Miss McGroarty's severed head was placed into a World Youth Day bag, a backpack, and he walked from his apartment at 245 Dunn down south. There's a large fence that separates the residential streets from the GO train tracks, and he threw Miss McGroarty's head over the fence leading down to the GO train tracks, and that's exactly where it was found. And he indicated that he took the arms and he got off streetcar eastbound, and he traveled with 2 severed human arms, and he put them in a dumpster at the rear of a 7-Eleven at Broadview and Queen. And when they arrived, they told me that this particular dumpster at the rear of the 7-Eleven was filled beyond capacity, and that they had to comb through the garbage, and that the box that Mr. Wisnowski indicated the arms were in were found deep, deep into the dumpster.
There's been an arrest in relation to the torso remains, and the arrest came late this afternoon. It came directly as a result of information we received from the community. She's definitely not a street person. She's exactly what we indicated. She was living a traditional lifestyle. She's involved in a domestic that went horribly wrong, and as a result of that, the individual finds himself in the cells right now.
It was then a matter of preparing the case and gathering as much possible evidence as we possibly could in order to make sure that we can put a full case before the court and ultimately have a good outcome at the end of the day.
Coming up, even with Robert's confession, police will have to work to corroborate his story if they want justice for Rose. Welcome back. Now that police have a confession, they must build a solid case to secure a conviction. We now return to the conclusion of the tragic slaying of a Good Samaritan.
The search warrant on Dunn Avenue in the apartment was done approximately 2 days after his arrest. In the bedroom, there was a wall-to-wall carpet. It was red in color. We're going to take further samples of the carpet to try and match them to the fibers that are on the torso. Another thing we observed was the presence of black garbage bags that were in the bedroom. It was an odd place for them to be. They were sitting on a chair in the corner of the bedroom. What we were looking for in the bathroom area is the presence of one, blood that would have been as a result of cutting up the victim during the dismemberment. You can imagine in executing that sort of a scenario, there is going to be quite a large quantity of blood that's going to be in and around the bathroom area.
I spent many hours on my knees with my eyes close to the floor, examining the floor, examining the wall, examining the bathtub. I expected to find a little bit of blood. I expected the blood to be not easily found, not obvious. What I did not expect was how little of the blood would be there. What I found was 8 tiny little blood stains. They were so small, less than 1 millimeter in diameter. And they were hidden behind a bathtub curtain. That's all we found. That was it. There was nothing else in terms of visibility, in terms of blood staining. The other item that was removed from the scene and examined in the laboratory was the shower curtain. Due to its size and color, it was burgundy and green, dark colors and patterns. I couldn't really see much on it in the scene. I examined it on my bench using stereo microscope, and I was able to find 2 very small, very light blood stains on it.
There were scratches and marks that were deep enough to believe that they came from a foreign object like a saw hitting the edges of the bathtub, causing the damage to the bathtub. One of the areas that we examined was the bank accounts of Rose McGroarty and of our accused, Robert Wisnowski. I found that Mr. Wisnowski was writing checks to cash on Rose McGroarty's bank account, and he was signing Rose's name to these checks and then endorsing them on the back as well. He would then go to a bank machine nearby, deposit the check for $60, $80 or whatnot, and then immediately take out that amount. I believe that was facilitating him to buy quantities of crack cocaine or drugs in those amounts. Also, what we found in the apartment were pawn tickets to a local pawn shop. Sure enough, we discovered that he had pawned jewelry that belonged to Rose. We executed a number of search warrants on telephone records. One was to establish the connection between the timelines for when Rose would call her mother, who lived outside of Toronto, and we noticed phone calls to Rose's mother after the fact when we believed that she was already deceased. And then there was a very strange sequence of phone calls that I uncovered, and what they are is they're sex chat lines. We found there was close to $900 worth of charges for these types of phone calls. And when we examined the date and the time frames that these phone calls were being made, it coincided when we believed the dismemberment was happening. Wisnowski is basically draining her accounts. He's killed her, and now he's using all of her money to get through what he's done.
I believe Robert Wisnowski was remorseful, and the reason I say that is that he confessed during the interview to what he had done. He appeared to me to be emotional. He was crying. He went on to seek the assistance of a lawyer. He waived his preliminary hearing, and he went directly to the Superior Court of Justice, and he pled guilty to 2 offenses, manslaughter and an indignity to a dead human body.
He was charged with second-degree murder, and he eventually pleaded guilty to manslaughter for a 15-year sentence. What led to that was the fact that the Crown had difficulty proving that the blow with the lug wrench was the cause of death, because although it was a serious injury, the deceased had pre-existing conditions that might very well have led to her death.
And we knew from her medical history that Miss McGroarty had epilepsy, so the pathologist was speculating that Miss McGroarty could have died from an epileptic seizure as a result of the blow to the head. And as a result of that, the final cause of death was no anatomical cause of death, but it was an unlawful act, and as a result of that, it was manslaughter, and the dismemberment was covered by the charge of an indignity to a dead human body.
In my view, had we tried this case, the jury might very well have convicted him of second-degree murder on an emotional basis because of his conduct, because of what he did to her after she was dead. But the Crown did the right thing.
I would very much like to be able to say terrible things about him. I would. I didn't know him. What I know is what he did to my volunteer and my friend. And for that, that would force me to say terrible things. But I don't know what drove him. The way Rosie's life ended was tragic, and it was heinous. It was hurtful to her and to the entire community.
You know, I didn't think it was fair for Rose to be remembered as just a homicide victim, as a statistic, as some gruesome thing, that an act committed by somebody else. I wanted her to be remembered for her courage and for her generosity and for her understanding of what other people are going through, and for being non-judgmental about that.
She was really a good person, and she worked at the park, and I think she did some volunteer there and got my daughter something for, you know, when she was born, and oh, it makes you sad, it makes you want to cry.
I get pain here because I know her, I saw her every day, and she was a nice person and always happy, smile.
Rosie's legacy in the community is for all of us to be more aware of the people that are working beside us and contributing to society beside us, and that we need to take care of each other.
In talking with some community leaders, we thought, you know, what would be helpful is to create a small scholarship in Rose's name, and to have her name remembered in a positive light as someone helping other women. They thought that the best thing would be to offer a scholarship to a woman who had been in a violent situation, as Rose McGroarty was, but who was turning her life around, as Rose did, and but who was going back to school and could use the scholarship to help with her education. It's unfair, it's profoundly sad, but you know, she doesn't have to be defined by her death. She doesn't. You know, I think she can be defined by the love and the support and the nourishment that she gave to other people, and personally, that's how I would like her to be remembered.
As of December 30th, 2018, Robert Wisnowski had served his sentence and was released from prison. Over the decade following Rose's death, her memory continued to inspire women of Parkdale, not just through the scholarships that were awarded, but also by the creation of PAVE, dedicated to addressing issues of violence in the community.
I'm Anthony Robart. Thank you for joining us tonight on Crime Beat.
Want more episodes of Crime Beat? Listen to the Crime Beat podcast, now for free on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you find your favorite podcast. And for past episodes of Crime Beat, go to the Global TV app, visit globaltv.com, or check out our Crime Beat YouTube page.